Good evening, guys, and welcome to another episode of ARCA Racing Backmarker News. I'm your host of the ARCA Racing podcast, Colby Evans, and we have a fun little show for you guys today. I don't normally do videos on Mondays, but because of all the big news that has happened today, I thought, why not do a little bonus episode for you guys? As always, follow me on Twitter at StartandParkCar. Follow my good friends at ARCA Racing, ARCA_Racing, and of course, the man himself, Brad Smith, at Driver Brad Smith. So anyway, let's get into the NASCAR news portion because there's a little bit less than that than ARCA. So we'll get into NASCAR first. It was reported over the weekend. I believe it was over the weekend. Sorry, I'm already botching early. Andy Lally apparently, despite being one of the first announcements of Alpha Prime Racing, was released from his contract. Now, the full details of that release, I don't believe have been released yet. And supposedly, Andy's going to be driving for a different team. What that team is, we don't know. The circumstances of the release, we still don't know. Obviously, we don't know if that'll even be fully released, or will they just give like a little subdued reason as to why. Either way, I hate it because obviously Alpha Prime Racing was stepping up their equipment. We had just went over on the last episode of my news episodes that Alpha Prime was expanding to 2 full-time teams. So obviously they were going to upgrade their equipment, upgrade everything, and unfortunately, we won't get to see just how good Andy Lally may have been in that equipment. Where does Andy Lally still lie? Does he go back to Our, or does he land to a new team? Obviously, Our with 3 full-time cars, likelihood is that is out of the picture. So where does Andy Lally go? That's a big question for me right now, is because remember, there's a lot of Xfinity teams out there. But I'm going to throw out a little limit that says, what about SRQ Development? J.C. Stout's team. Remember, that team bought some Joe Gibbs racing equipment. So to me, that's who I actually see Lally going to. I know it's a weird decision. I know it's really weird. It's not really, it's kind of out there, but I feel like for some reason that'd be a good fit. Andy Lally with a startup team in SRQ Development, but has good equipment. I don't know why. I feel like that would be a good fit. I do agree in the chat, yes. Do they have road course cars? We don't know that right now. But I feel like that'd be a good fit. I can't really think of any other team that maybe Andy would fit in at. Maybe BJ again. Wouldn't be shocked if he goes back to BJ. The problem is that it'd have to be the one car. I think it would be the 99. Which BJM car is open? I know 78 was taken by Williams. Was 99 taken by Parsons? So maybe he'll go back to BJ again. But where does Andy Lally lie? Either way, Andy will have a good ride for this year because even in his late 40s, hard to believe Andy Lally is almost 50 years old. Makes me feel old because I watched him when he was in his late 20s. But even in his late 40s, Andy Lally's still kicking ass, and hopefully he can get a good ride for the season because he deserves it. Even at his age, he can still go. Speaking of another team that has parted ways with its driver, one that I'm kind of sad about because I always thought it was a good pairing, Kyle Weatherman and Mike Harmon Racing. Now, Mike Harmon's 2021 season did not end the best. The 74 had an extremely rough season, DNQing the last race of the season and not finishing the last 8 races DNFing. Not a good season for that 74 team, and the 47 team overall did not perform up to standards despite getting back into the top 36. But it was revealed, I think it was, Saturday, that they had parted ways. And where does Kyle Weatherman go? There's not many open Xfinity teams right now. Again, Kyle has also worked as a mechanic. So does Kyle go back to being a mechanic for another team, or is he going to drive a different car? Right now, this leaves open both of the Mike Harmon Racing entries. I don't know why. I see something with maybe a partnership between Mike Harmon and Jesse Wuji. That would not shock me because remember, we have yet to hear anything out of Jesse Iwuji Motorsports. I love Jesse. He's awesome, but we've yet to hear anything out of that team. A shop, a crew chief, drivers, and we are less than, actually a little over a month from the debut race. We've yet to hear anything from this team. So I have to think that maybe Jesse Iwuji might do something with Mike Harmon Racing. It definitely brings some extra money to Mike Harmon, and it would take away some of the expenses. I mean, they could easily take that sponsorship that they announced and go into Mike Harmon. We'll just have to see then there. But like I said, for Alpha Prime, Andy Lally, Kyle Weatherman, and Mike Harmon, I wish all four of them the best. Shame to see those pairings go away, because definitely was a big fan of all four of those teams and drivers, and I hope they can find the success that they need for this season. The Florida team, does Kyle Weatherman go to DGM? That would be a good fit. That would be a great fit. Kyle Weatherman is a great driver, and DGM has really come into its own. So that would be a good fit if he goes to that Florida team. Well, like you said, does the Mike Harmon Racing even find a full-time driver this season, like I see in the chat? I don't think they do. Right now they haven't announced anything. But will Mike Harmon even have a full-time driver? We don't know yet. Could see maybe Greg Galding going back there, but again, it's all a rumor. And likelihood is for those teams, we might not see an announcement until a couple of weeks before the actual entry lists has come out for Xfinity. We did get some fun news today. Honestly, one of the more nicest things coming out of the news of today for NASCAR portion, Josh Bilicki will join Spire Motorsports' 77 team. But if you look at the Spire post, it says as a driver of the 77 car. That indicates that must not be a full-time ride. Josh Bilicki did say he was joining the 77 team. But if you go to that post on the Spire Motorsports page and you read it, maybe I'm just misconstruing words, but it does say as a driver of the 77. It doesn't say as the driver. So is that just a botch on their part? Or is Bilicki only running part-time? Because again, we saw multiple drivers in the 77 last season. I think we might see the same case this season. Anyway, I think it's definitely a ride where Bilicki could show his talent, because he was being hindered by the Rick Ware racing car. Obviously, not even being close to up to speed and relatively finishing almost the lowest of his teammates. But it's a shame, because I think Bilicki could really show what he's got in a full-time ride. Obviously, I'm curious to see how he does at the road courses and upgraded equipment. Now, obviously, Spire is not the best team in NASCAR, but they are, you could say, a little bit more competitive than Rick Ware Racing. And as we saw, Bilicki got a 23rd place finish at Road America in a Rick Ware car. Imagine what he can do in a 77 Spire car. So I think that's definitely a great partnership. I think the only sponsor they announced is Ziegler Auto Group. So it'll be interesting to see if Junction Fuels and Insurance King are going to follow him to the 77 team. But definitely, I think a good partnership. And again, I love Spire team, and I think it's a good fit. Obviously, of course, with Rick Ware downsizing from 4 to 2 cars, Bilicki pretty much had nowhere else to go for the Cup Series that was available. I am seeing in the chat the news that kind of didn't really get fully mentioned because they didn't make a big deal of it. But for the people who have been following the West Series that I've been covering, the Australian driver Bridget Burgess actually posted on her Facebook and Twitter, I think it was before Christmas. I completely forgotten about this until they reminded me in the chat. But she had actually purchased an Xfinity car. And when you zoomed in on what the car was from, it was actually a DGM Racing chassis. Now note, Bridget has raced at Phoenix before. Does this intend that Bridget might attempt the Phoenix Xfinity race this season? I could see that. I could very well see that. The one thing she'll need, though, is owner points. Because if she tries to go that race with no owner points, with all due respect to Bridget, she is not going to be quick enough to make that show on time. She's just not experienced enough to really handle an Xfinity car hard enough to make the show. But I'm glad they brought that back up because I had yet to talk about that. I really hope we see something come out of that for this season. They could convert it to an ARCA car as well, but I really would like to see them attempt the Xfinity race just anyway, just out of spite. Because it seems really weird that they would buy an Xfinity car all the way from Florida to take it all the way back to Utah. Like, oh man, that must be a long ride. Other NASCAR news, and today, what, I feel like I'm forgetting one of the big NASCAR news of today. The 77, obviously, like I said, we mentioned with Bilicki, will not be running the whole season in that car. Who would the other drivers be? Now, I've seen some people mention Kaz Grala, but I've also heard some people mention that Kaz Grala might be going to the 20 car. Going to not the 20 car, the 20 truck for Young's Motorsports, which I actually think would be a good fit. I really do hope that they get that 20 car, the 20 truck. God, I keep botching. That would be a good fit for Young's Motorsports. Spencer Boyd going to the 12 and the 20. I don't really understand the need for number swapping all the time with this team. Like, why? If Spencer Boyd's just going to stay with the team, why did he just stay in the number 20? My only guess is they wanted to transfer him to the number 12 because the 12 has more owner points, and Spencer needs all the owner points he can get to make races. That's just me being a little against Spencer Boyd because he's a little slow. He's a lot. He's pretty slow. But yeah, I mean, I hope Grala gets the ride. I think having Grala and Jesse Little at a team like Young's, that could easily propel that team into the top 20. I would say every week in the trucks. Easily, that team could run top 20 every week in the trucks. And then you'll have Spencer running outside the top 25. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised Spencer didn't jump to Xfinity too from the chat, but maybe the mini Dogecoin sponsorship, maybe there wasn't enough of it. We'll just have to see. Obviously, people mentioning in the chat, my knucklehead self forgot the biggest news of the day. Aric Almirola announcing his retirement. Obviously, this is the Backmarker podcast, so he's obviously not a backmarker. But he's definitely raced for the backmarkers. For the people who do not remember, people say Aric Almirola has been, he's thanked his entire career to Smithfield. He worked for that partnership because people don't remember back in 2010, he started and parked the remaining races in 2009 and early 2010 for the Phoenix Racing Team. And I believe also tried to attempt a start and park race for Tommy Baldwin at Talladega as well in 2010. So it was not an easy going for Aric Almirola. He really struggled in his early Cup career. But I hope Aric definitely does a good job this season. I hope he can win a couple of races. Not looking too good, maybe winning a couple of races, but obviously we want Aric to go out on top. He deserves it. And go out on top, make the playoffs. He will not win the championship. Anyone who says that he will win the championship as last year is lying to you. He will not. But I certainly hope that Aric does make the championship run so at least he can go out somewhat on top. We'll transfer into the ARCA portion of our show, which is kind of the main portion of today's show. Wanted to get the NASCAR news out of the way first. We do have a little bit of announcements before we'll get into our main discussion of this one episode. The Venturini Motorsports announcements just keep coming. We have another announcement, and this is our main driver of the 15 car, it's looking like, for 2022. Parker Chase, who drove for Chad Bryant at Daytona 2019 and drove for Kyle Busch at the Daytona Road Course in 2021, last season, will drive the 15 at, looks like 9 ARCA events this season. Thanks to frontstretch.com, he'll be driving at Daytona, Phoenix, Talladega, Charlotte, Mid-Ohio, Pocono, Watkins Glen, Kansas, and Bristol. Now, I believe that Kansas race is the second one because it would have been before the other races. So 9 races this season, and I think that's definitely a good partnership. We haven't seen Parker all that much. He did drive, didn't he drive for Venturini last season, though? I'm going to look that up real quick because I believe he did drive the 25 for Venturini last season, and I'm just forgetting about it, which is a brain fart on me. Yeah, sure enough. He did drive the 25 and 15 last year for Venturini, so who knows how he'll do this year. Definitely number change. Looks like maybe a sponsor change as well. We'll just have to see. But it looks like Venturini right now has still yet to not announce a full-time driver yet. Will Venturini is planning on fielding 3 full-time teams. Remember that. But will they even have a full-time driver? Now, I think that'd be really sad that a team like Venturini could not get a full-time driver. But unfortunately, that's just how it goes. You know, when the money's just not there, you got to take what you can take. And it looks like that the 15 car has been pretty well filled up with drivers. Now, we're still hearing the rumors that it might be Gracie Trotter, Tony Breidinger. They might get that 25 car full time, or they might split it. Tony in 10 races and Gracie in 10 races. I think personally I'd rather have Gracie Trotter in the car, but that's just me. But we'll have to see. But it looks like that Venturini might not have a full-time driver in 2022. We'll just have to see for an announcement, hopefully in the next coming days. Obviously, with Daytona testing, you look at the driver lineup that they're bringing. We'll go over that in a second. That might give you a little bit of a telling sign. But definitely good to see more announcements for drivers. And good luck to Parker in his 2022 season. My good buddy Mark Christie, who does report a lot of ARCA information. For people who don't remember, Young's Motorsports did have an ARCA team in 2021. They weren't around full-time, but they made more starts than people remembered. They weren't really up there in the front part of the pack, so people didn't kind of remember them. Hopefully my computer will work. There we go. But Connor Mosack, who you guys remember, he ran the 02. Now that was actually a partnership between Bruce Cook Racing and Young's Motorsports. That was a partnership effort towards the end of the season as they partnered at Michigan, but I do believe it was actually a Young's Motorsports car the remaining races. But going into 2022, it was announced via Mark Christie that from a Connor Mosack spokesperson representative that he will drive part-time next season in the ARCA series. Well, I guess this season. And it will not be for Young's Motorsports. It'll actually be for Bret Holmes Racing. I think that counted 9 races. You can go to the Connor Mosack website, which, in fact, I'll go to it right here, and I'll go ahead and read you guys off the races. So the one thing that does tell us, Bret Holmes Racing will be back this season for ARCA. The question is, how many races? Will it be full-time? No. But that does tell us that they could not find the funding to go full-time truck racing. So it looks like it might be the same season as it was back in 2021, where they're part-time trucks, maybe more truck races, probably around maybe about 10 or 11 truck races, and part-time ARCA. It also could be that the only reason why their ARCA team is still going is because of Connor. That could be as well. Connor Mosack will run the following races. They will not be running Daytona, but they will run Phoenix, the first Kansas race, Charlotte, Iowa, Mid-Ohio, Pocono, Indianapolis, Watkins Glen, Milwaukee, and Bristol. And again, those races will be run with Bret Holmes Racing, likely the number 23. And hopefully we see Bret Holmes Racing make another announcement that they'll be competing in more races in 2021 because, like many, it was really, really sad to not see Bret Holmes show up to Kansas in that season finale as I thought he would have. But definitely good to see that Bret Holmes will continue his relationship with the ARCA series and will likely also remain a part-time truck team. I know the plan was to go probably full-time this season, but obviously if you don't have the sponsorship, do not attempt to go the full season in any racing league if you don't have the sponsorship. It's probably like rule number 1. As you guys also saw last season, Joey Iest did run full-time. I'm going to botch this so bad because I've always botched his name. Naki Kluwer Motorsports. I probably botched that name so bad. It was the red 54 car that Joey ran in the West Series last season. He will be returning to that car full-time for this season in another effort for the West Championship. Came so close. He was one of the 7 drivers who had a shot at winning the West Championship at Phoenix last season. Hopefully he can parlay that into another championship run as well this year. As I mentioned in the last episode, DGR is only planning 1 car. So the likelihood is East's run in the East Series is not going to continue, unfortunately. Now on to the big kahuna for today's episode. Daytona ARCA testing has officially been announced for their entry list. It'll take place Friday and Saturday, Sunday if needed because of rain. Your standard times, the haulers enter, you got your on-track time. We don't need to really go into the scheduling because unfortunately it's not broadcasted. I do believe it is open to the public. The NASCAR test that is happening tomorrow is open to the public, both infield and outfield, or grandstands, I mean. I do believe the ARCA test is also open to the public. Now, I'm not completely sure about that, but be nice if it was. Obviously, it's like every ARCA entry list. You got your primaries, and then you're going to have the ones that'll show up last minute, and some that won't even be on the entry list, but still show up. But anyway, let's go over some of the main entry. I'll go over the entire entry list with you guys. So obviously, we have our first one, the number 2, Nick Sanchez of Rev Racing. Mullins Racing is bringing a huge fleet. Now, it's unclear how many different cars they're going to run. It looks like they have a Chevy for Willie. Now, that's probably Willie's car he's going to run at Daytona. And it looks like they're also bringing Willie's orange Ford. And that'll have drivers Logan Clark, Cole Bruce, Brayton Lester, Blake Lothian, Robert Bruce, and our ARCA man who works for Tommy Joe Martin's Alpha Prime in the Xfinity Series, Brad Perez is driving for Willie Mullins in the ARCA test. That is awesome. Brad posted that on his Twitter today, and he's just such a lovable guy. He actually is actively searching for sponsorship to run that race anyway, but it's great to hear that Brad is getting another chance. And, for all the times that guy's crewed at Daytona, what a dream. Even if it's just a test session, to go out there and run laps on one of the most famous racetracks in America. What an honor. So cool for Brad. I hope sponsorship and the race can come of it. But congratulations to Brad Perez. He's 100% deserves it. And it's cool to see Willie Mullins really coming into the ARCA series for this season. Not really normal for him to bring this many cars and drivers to show up to testing. But I do believe that all the guys that are in the Ford, I only think they're bringing 1 car because they all have to be listed in different numbers. I don't believe Willie Mullins has 8 or 9 ARCA cars. I don't think any ARCA team has 8 or 9 ARCA cars. But I believe Willie's bringing 2 cars, the black and red Chevrolet, and then the orange, blue, and yellow and white Ford, which the other guys will share. So our next round of drivers, Supposedly, people have been talking about this. The quarter man himself, Dale Quarterly, will be doing Daytona testing. But the one thing that people have looked at is the sponsor listing, and it says BGR. Now, remember, we saw Bobby Gerhart Racing. The team did not dissolve. It's simply Bobby had a heart attack, for the people who didn't remember, and I guess they kind of shut the team down. Now, and we saw Dale come back to ARCA last season at Watkins Glen. So it looks like Dale is still not done racing yet, even at his age. And will they actually run the race at Daytona? I hope they do, but it's clear that it looks like Bobby Gerhart's racing team is not done yet. And that's great. It's great to see that Bobby Gerhart still might be in the sport despite suffering his heart attack. Thankfully lived. We need Bobby Gerhart still in the sport. But definitely good news there. And hopefully they actually run the more than the test. Raja Caruth, obviously, Nick Sanchez's teammate. They might be only bringing one car down there. I think Rev is only bringing the 2 cars. I don't believe they're bringing any extra cars. Likelihood is Rev wants to use both of these cars at Daytona and Talladega, so they might try to play a little safe. So, but good to see Raja out there. Obviously, this will help him in his future Xfinity career later on down the season for Alpha Prime. Sorry, I'm a little parched. All right. Then we got Eric Caudell's team, CCM Racing. They will have, I think, just the one car, and that'll be the Ford. Kevin Hinkle, Matt Wilson, and Thomas Pachero. I'm not good with names. But it looks supposedly they're bringing 4 drivers down, but only 3 are listed right now. So I wonder, supposedly Steve Austin said that he was also going to be testing at Daytona as well. So we'll have to see if that's actually going to happen. Kind of a shocking entry. And I thought they had shut down. Empire Racing is listed with Sean Corr and another driver in Brandon Hunt, which is very weird considering that if you go to their page on Facebook, it's closed. But it's still amazing that Empire Racing is still going. I thought they were done. I hadn't heard any reports about them being ready. Now, they did not crash their car last season, but it's interesting that they're running a Chevrolet. That could be the Chevrolet, though, that Mike Dalton had ran back at Southern National last year. That could be the same car. But it's good to see that Empire Racing is still going, even after all these years and with the sponsorship really not there anymore. Good to see that Sean Corr's team is still going. Then we got the many cars and drivers of Fast Track Racing. The 10 car will have Arnaut Koch, Devin Rouse, and Brandon Varney. Now, that'll be listed in the 10 car. Likely, again, the same car. Andy usually brings about 3 or 4 cars to Daytona testing with multiple drivers. Sorry to scratch my eye there. We got the 15 for Venturini, which doesn't have a driver listed yet. And this is a little bit of the telling sign as to who may drive the 18 when Sammy Smith is not in the 18 because of age. Drew Dollar. Everybody's favorite, Drew Dollar, is listed in the 18 car for Daytona. And I got to believe that's got to mean that he's going to be driving the 4 races that Sammy is not old enough to run yet. And Drew may not be the best decision, but as long as it gets that 18 car out there, that's okay with me. But it's a telling sign that it will be Drew Dollar in the 18 with his Sunbelt Rentals sponsorship. And obviously, he is 17, so he is old enough to do the Daytona test anyway. Sammy Smith will be there driving an 18 car, even though he's not old enough to actually run the race. Obviously, we saw the announcement for the 20 car. It'll be both Jesse Love and Corey Heim because Jesse turns 17 on January 14th, so he will be old enough to run the Daytona test. despite, just like Sammy Smith, not actually being able to run the race with Corey driving the car for him. A 25 car for Venturini. Again, no driver listed yet. Likelihood is that might be either Gracie or Tony or both. We'll just have to see upcoming. Excuse me. Red A Motorsports is bringing down 2 cars. Actually, looks like it's 3 cars, or possibly 2 cars with 3 drivers, I mean. Obviously, Amber Balkin has to run Daytona. She hasn't been to a track that big before. She's got to run Daytona to get cleared, so that's pretty obvious. And then they're bringing a second car, which ironically enough is a Chevy, considering that Red A Jones is primarily a Ford team with drivers Max Gutierrez, who ran for the team last season, and Logan Bearden, who I believe, didn't he attempt a race with Nice Motorsports last season? I think that name seems familiar. Greg Van Elst will also be there for the Daytona test in a Chevrolet, not in his usual Ford. We did see him run Chevrolets at his super speedway races and then focus on the Fords for his smaller track races. Dean Thompson, obviously, again, that's the biggest track that I believe Dean's ever been on. So you gotta run the Daytona test if you're going to run full-time truck. This is why I don't really like having the Truck Series race before ARCA now, is because it's the same thing that Nice Motorsports kind of did last year with Carson Hocevar. They ran the Daytona test to get approval for trucks, but you don't have to run the actual ARCA race. I kind of hated that because I liked when the rookies had to run the ARCA race then to get experience for the truck race. So the likelihood is that Dean Thompson is just running Daytona testing and not the actual race. And everybody's favorite dirt driver, Tyler Carpenter, will also run for Nice Motorsports at Daytona. Tyler was the guy who won that Arena Dirt Late Model Show, which guarantees him a ride for Nice Motorsports at Knoxville. Very controversial. I've heard not many people like him. I've heard he's that type of driver from what I've seen in comments on Facebook and Twitter. You either love Tyler or you hate Tyler. That's kind of how I've seen it go. But it's good to see another kid get an opportunity, especially at a track like Daytona. And I don't believe it's leading to anything as to the race. Again, I simply think this is Nice getting their drivers approved, and that's it. They're not actually going to be running the Daytona race, which is a shame because we could use the cars. The 42 team is running. Chevrolet, likelihood is this is a Bruce Cook Racing entry with Christian Rose. Christian Rose ran a couple of West races this season. We might see Bruce Cook Racing do more of the East races that they did like last season. I would not be shocked if we see maybe Christian Rose go full-time East racing like Bruce Cook Racing did the previous year. I think it'd be a good partnership. Christian did get a couple of top 10s, so I think definitely it's worth the trip. Again, I don't think it's actually leading to a Daytona appearance. I think it's merely that they're going down there because, well, it's Daytona. Who doesn't want to run laps at Daytona? Daniel Dye, again, I think it's the biggest track that Daniel's ever been on. So again, you got to get approval for that track to be able to race. It is a GMS entry using the Ben Kennedy Racing 43 number, so that's nice. Good to see John Ferrier back. I was afraid that after the heavy crash that he had at Talladega last year, that John Ferrier would not be back, but he usually runs the 2 super speedway races, and he'll be back this year for testing with his own team. Just one car himself and teammate Mark Lowery. Again, I believe it's just one car for the 2 of them. But again, good to see John Ferrier back. And this is not just a team that's going to run testing. John Ferrier's team will be there for Daytona testing at Daytona and will actually be at Daytona 2 running the race. But it will be John driving the car. Our next people, it is the Josh Williams team. Good buddy Josh Williams, who If you don't love Josh Williams, you got something wrong with you. That's all I'm going to say up front. Josh Williams, one of the most lovable guys, nicest guys you'll ever meet. And yes, for people who don't know, John Ferry does co-own that team with Jeff McClure. Now, Josh does have, we did see in a Twitter video with Brad Perez a couple of days ago, Brad working on some of Josh's ARCA cars. Those did look like Chevrolets, but we do know that Josh also has a black Ford that he ran a couple years ago. Which car he'll bring, we don't know yet. But the drivers who will be driving for him will be Michael Lira, Logan Misuraka, and Daniel Escoda. Looks like we'll be running laps around Daytona again, possibly to get approval at any race they might run later in the season. And, again, just also have some fun. Everybody's favorite ARCA old guy, Dave Mader. He'll be back this year. I knew Spraker Racing was not done. I knew they were selling the car that Chase Purdy was supposed to run at Watkins Glen. They have sold that car, but I knew they were going to continue with Dave Mader. I'm really surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm really happy that Dave Mader's still back after that awesome second-place finish that he had at Talladega last season. So good to see that team back. Scott Melton will be back with Kimmel. Kimmel is bringing down a red Ford. They're not running a Toyota with Scott Melton, Gage Rogers, and Jason Miles. And speaking of Jason Miles, we have yet to hear anything out of this NDS Motorsports. I think that was the name of the team. Supposedly this team that's going to run Xfinity and full-time ARCA. I don't see it happening. I hope it does, but I also don't see it happening at all. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But supposedly that's what the plan is for Jason, is they're still running Daytona with their own team. I'll believe it when I see it. But good to see Kimmel still going. You know, even though they're no longer full-time, it's good to see the Bill Kimmel Racing team and Will Kimmel still plugging away after all these years. Everybody's favorite, the Pizza Man. Obviously, we already knew he was going to be back for Daytona. The Pizza Man himself, Andy Jenkowiak, will return for Daytona testing. I do believe this is the same car that he ran last year. I don't think it's a new car, but if it is, somebody correct me. I would like to know. We have now, supposedly this car is from Bryce Hodgeberg Racing, but Dawson Cram posted a picture of it on his Twitter, and ironically enough, it still has the Chris Hacker wrap on it from when Chris Hacker ran it back at Charlotte last year. So it tells me that ARCA car has not been touched. Since Charlotte, I guess. But that's okay, because Dawson, that team's always so busy. I love Dawson. But Bryce Hodgeberg looks like has bought the car and will run also with Cody Erickson. That is also the same car that Benny Chastain ran at Daytona and Talladega last year as well. Doesn't look like Benny might be racing this year. And frankly, some people don't want him out there. Some people do. I like Benny, so we'll see if Benny gets a ride. Jason Kitzmiller, obviously CR7 Motorsports. Again, the only reason that ARCA team really exists is based on Jason's sponsorship, ALL Construction. Good to see him back again, but again, the whole thing will come down to how many races he's willing to sponsor and race. They didn't do that many last season. They will be at Daytona. They will be at Talladega, probably Pocono. We'll just have to see. But hopefully they run more races than they did last year. It'll all come down to how much, obviously, Jason can afford. We actually do have Peterson entries. The black Ford, which I believe will be the car. And yes, for the people who do not know, the black Ford debuted, I believe, in 2002 or 2003 and was a Dodge for Bill Davis Racing. Yes, that car, the black Ford for Peterson Motorsports, is entering either its 19th or its 20th year of service as a race car. That is awesome. And that's why we love Wayne Peterson. And that's also why we're doing a video saga on his cars. But that black Ford, the amount of racetrack that car has seen, it's amazing. It'll have drivers A.J. Moyer and Zachary Tinkle, despite the fact that Zachary will not be running the season with him. Likely they're just going to testing, so that way Zachary can get approved to run pretty much any race he wants to this season, despite him already being old enough. But I think he's got to run Daytona and Talladega. He might try to get a ride for Daytona and Talladega. You still got to do the Daytona test. And then our last one, and personally, this one makes the heart feel good. I feel like it's forgotten because it happened before COVID, and a lot more news happened right after it too. For the people who don't remember, Brian Coltrider's house, I believe, burnt to the ground. It was either his house or it was his garage. I believe it was his garage, and he lost everything. I believe he lost 2 ARCA cars. And I felt really, really bad for Brian. He kind of run the Pocono races. That's kind of the area he was from, and those are the races that he would try to run. But I felt bad for Brian. You know, he was a low-budget guy who just scratched and clawed to get to the track and just tried to have fun. And I thought he had pretty much lost everything in that garage. He had lost his chassis, his bodies, his toolboxes, everything. He had really lost everything in his garage from that fire. And it really makes the heart feel good that he will be back at Daytona testing in the 07 again. So I think that's a little bit of a sentimental story, and I hope that Brian runs Daytona, and I'll be definitely cheering him on. So if you guys want a good sentimental story for Daytona and Daytona testing, look at Brian Coltrider. And I think that's the underdog story that we need to follow. If Brian runs Daytona, that's the underdog story that I'm going to personally follow a lot more. But I feel like that's an ARCA story that gets forgotten about because I don't think ARCA Racing even posted about it. I think Brian just posted about it on his Facebook. And then they started a GoFundMe, which unfortunately went nowhere. But I believe that's the big sentimental thing of the ARCA entry list for Daytona testing is that Brian Coltrider, even at his age, he's starting to get up there in age, still going. So if you want an underdog story, there you go. And the answer to the chat is Brad testing. Again, it was not confirmed whether Brad would actually be testing the new Ford. They're still trying to get that car figured out. It's possible that that car may not run Daytona. We just have to see. Obviously, Brad doesn't have unlimited time to work on the car. It's possible that they may have to bring down the red Chevrolet again if it's not ready. But obviously, they want to bring the red car, the red Ford, to Daytona testing to get all the kinks worked out. But if they don't believe the car is ready to run Daytona testing, they're not even going to bring it to Daytona testing and probably hope for the best at the actual Daytona race. So that's an update on Brad, who was not on the entry list, but may be added at a later date. Or, like I said, he might just be one of those teams that just shows up the day of the show and the entry list just never gets updated. And then our last thing of drivers, and this is kind of the usual thing, our Andy Hillenberg list of drivers. And this is what I was always hyping. Andy always brings up a big list of drivers. So we'll go in order of these drivers. John Garrett, Tanner Allen, Hunter Jack, Luke Fenhouse, who drove the SRX machine last year and should have won that race at Slinger. Jake Drew, who's going to be in his ARCA West team this season. Mason Diaz, good old Ed Pompa, Tim Monroe, Chuck Hears, Tony Cosentino, Mark Agladinger. I'm so happy. I'm so sorry if I botched that name. Martin Dubeck. And our last person on the entry list is Mason Maggio. I just talked to him a couple days ago. Check it out. It's in the video file. But that is our list of ARCA people who will be at the test. The drivers I just listed, there's no number listed yet. They will more than likely be under Andy. They are under Andy Hillenberg's team, but the number is not listed yet. Likely 11s and 12s, because those are the only other numbers that Andy hasn't used yet, and maybe has a couple of 01s in there. As for how many cars are showing up, that's what I said. Like, yeah, Maggio is not testing for Hillenberg, but he will be there. Mason will be there. As for how many cars, I think I just said, I don't know if anyone kept count for me, but looks like maybe a little over 20 cars. So definitely enough cars out there to do some decent drafting. I'm just very excited. It's always good to see Daytona ARCA testing out there. Hell, I could also see maybe Mason driving for Venturini. We have seen Venturini and Rick Ware work together in the past for ARCA. But I think it's a good field for ARCA testing. And again, my goal for the Daytona ARCA race this year, we had 34 last year. I want 35. I want 35 cars there, and I hope we get it. Now, will it be close? Yes. The lowest field of cars we had there was 33. I don't want to dip below 33. So that's the goal for me. We'll be here on Friday and Saturday going over ARCA testing results and notes. And next week, we'll have an ARCA finale. Result finale for Daytona testing. And we'll go over some more news and notes. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode. I would say it was going to be a quick episode, and here we are, and it's 46 and a half minutes. So, sorry it wasn't too quick. But I said in the chat here, expect Breininger to be announced full-time in the 25 next coming days. Well, we'll believe it when we see it, but that's gonna be something if we see that for sure. But anyway, guys, thank you again for joining me on tonight's show. I know it was last minute. I know it was rushed, but I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed my opinions. Watch Daytona testing. Obviously, you got the NASCAR test tomorrow. Obviously, we got the Chili Bowl. By the way, go JJ Yaley. But all this fun racing stuff, the season is back. The off season is over. Let's go racing. Enjoy the week, guys. I'll enjoy my week, and we'll catch y'all next time. So long, guys.